Hello, it is February 13th, Thursday at 9 o'clock, or not about 9:02. And this is Chris, and Bill is not with me. We actually had a scheduling conflict. So we recorded something yesterday at about 1 o'clock to talk about the three topics at hand: the replacement of Jeff Corcoran, the municipal court vacancy, and the Board of Elections selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play our conversation that we had yesterday. It's about 49 minutes long. It's the first time I've ever tried to play something that wasn't live. So hopefully it works out. If it doesn't, I can always upload it so that people can watch it. So without further ado, let me try to attempt to start the conversation Bill and I had yesterday. I actually think it's a pretty good conversation. So hopefully whoever watches it likes it. Here we go. Hi, Bill. It's Kurt. We're actually recording this on Wednesday at 1 o'clock for broadcast on Thursday to talk about three topics: the replacement of Jeff Corcoran as Central Committee Chair for the Clermont GOP, the Municipal Court judge selection, and the Board of Elections selection. So I'm with Bill Thomas here. Bill, how are you doing?
Good.
We both had some conflicts trying to get this worked out. So this is the first time we've actually pre-recorded something. So hopefully it works out good, and hopefully we still get some good content. So I think we can go pretty quick here on these three topics. And you and I are both a little bit on the outside because neither of us, you're not on Central Committee right now, and I'm suspended. But that either makes us good commentators on it or bad ones based on what you're part of. But I think each of us probably has some thoughts on these topics. We have not really talked about this at all before I started recording this. So we'll see if we have some areas of disagreement or agreement or some suggestions for people. So let's start with the Central Committee. So we know the Central Committee, Jeff Corcoran resigned after achieving his ultimate success of nobody wanting him to be Central Committee Chair anymore. so there's going to be, I think it's next Wednesday. I believe it's the 19th, if I have the date right. Is it the 19th
Yes.
or the 20th? It's the 19th.
The 19th
will be when there will be an election for a new Central Committee Chair. The only, and you and I have not talked about this, this is the moment we're recording this, the only person I know running for Central Committee Chair for sure is Byron Baxter. So what are your thoughts on, well, let me throw in too, Louisa McQueen, who people have seen talk with us, says she's running for vice chair of the Central Committee, which, by the way, would only be an open position if Byron Baxter were elected to be chair of the Central Committee or otherwise resign. So let's start with the Central Committee chair. What are your thoughts, Bill, on what should happen in the post-Jeff Corcoran era?
Well, what's interesting is, and I don't have a lot of clarity on this, but I thought if a position opens up on Central Committee, it has to be announced, and then you vote on the next regular meeting on that position. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, that's how the Constitution reads, or how
I think if you're getting at Louisa, I think if an election as it happens, don't hold me to this, but causes another opening to occur, that the other opening election can be held right then.
Okay. All right.
So, for example, if Byron Baxter got elected chair and that instantly created an opening in vice chair, the vice chair election could happen right then.
So it doesn't have to be announced and voted on in the next regular meeting.
Don't hold me to that, but I think that's the way it's worded.
So if that's the case, then yeah, you'll be voting on two things. And the thing about Byron is I have a lot of respect for Byron. I know you may have a different opinion on Byron, but I do have a lot of respect for him as far as his knowledge as a parliamentarian. But running the Central Committee, knowing parliamentarian law and procedure is a part of it. You need for organization and order, you need to know those skills. But there's a whole other component to being a Central Committee chair. One, it's almost like a judge. A judge, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat, they have to judge without bias. Technically, that's how our Supreme Court justices are supposed to judge. Well, a committee chair should be doing the same thing. Whether you agree with a motion, don't agree with a motion, whether you as long as it's a legit motion, it doesn't violate Ohio Revised Code, there should be no problems allowing a motion to come to a floor. So you got to take your personal feelings out of things, and you got to do what's good for the greater group, which technically would be a total of 168 people if the committee's full. That we have not seen that happen. I haven't felt, even with Dennis Cooper, which again I have a lot of respect, and I think the world of Dennis Cooper, but I had seen at times where Dennis would allow his personal feelings and his emotions bleed into that. As a committee chairman, you have to be unemotional, and you cannot be you can't be tied to a group. You can't be tied to a faction. You can't, you got to be able to stand against some of that and be a committee chair. And I've always said this from day one, the Central Committee should be comprised of 168 individual thinking minds, period. When I started Friends of Liberty, anybody that was part of Friends of Liberty would tell you, when I would pitch Central Committee to them, I would always tell them, I want to recruit people to Central Committee that are 168 individual thinking people. Not do what I tell them to do, not doing what someone else tells them to do. And our committee chair has to be in the same fashion. It has to be no ties, do the will of the committee. So can Byron Baxter really be that person to be completely separate, not take the pressure from a call from Linda Fraley or James Kidwell or dozens of other people that call and say, we're going to do this meeting, or we're going to do this meeting. You got to look at those people and say, no, we're going to do the will of the committee. And if you have something you want to bring to the floor, we'll bring it to the floor. But so that's an unknown variable. Can Byron really be able to stand up against people he's been friends with for 30 years or more and tell them, no, I'm not going to do that?
Well, I think that Byron has consistently been part of, I have a very different view of Byron than you. I feel like he is a hack when it comes to parliamentary procedure, and that it gets used. And I think, he was the vice chair under Corcoran. I don't remember Byron ever standing up in a meeting saying we have to, hear this motion or hear that motion. I just think it becomes very politicized. I think with Dennis Cooper, and Howard Hines was before Dennis Cooper, and Howard Hines was tightly attached to David Ubel. And then Dennis Cooper, was more straightforward. If you remember, if you had a motion, you were just supposed to have like 2 copies of it or 3 copies of it or something. So he would have a physical copy of what you were going to motion. So it made people have to think it through beforehand. But that still got, political. But I just feel like the certainty of being able to do anything has been least under the Jeff Corcoran era, and Byron has been an enabler of that. And by the way, Bill, if you look at it, Byron to me has been involved in what I call the big lie now of what was the reason I was suspended, where originally, and I think that was a parliamentary error, and now he's trying to cover his ass by changing the story that I had, instead of it being, as we've talked about, when I got suspended, if it was for stuff I did outside of meetings, I was supposed to have a trial by Robert's rules, and that's unambiguous. In theory, the only way you can suspend somebody in real time in a meeting would be that they did something so outrageous that you had to take action immediately. And I didn't do anything outrageous, even remotely. But when it came to light that the procedure had not been followed per Robert's rules, then all of a sudden the story became that I did something in the meeting that was so egregious, and they testified under oath in court to that. So my point is, I don't, we could leave it there. My thing is, I would be interested to see too, if Byron Baxter were to get elected Central Committee chair, can he, be fair? And and to your point of people asking right now, like, I know one person, our friend Barry, he would be calling up Byron saying, the only one thing I want from you is I want you to assure me that you will not allow any motion to revoke any suspensions.
I think what needs to happen on Wednesday, and I'm really calling out Union Township because no one else really has the backbone on the Central Committee anymore to do this, other than maybe Louisa, and she wouldn't be able to do this because she'll be running. So it would not be proper for her to have this discussion. Somebody needs to address in discussion before the motion's voted on. Are you willing to right the wrong of what took place in Chris Hicks's suspension? That question needs to be asked of the Central Committee, not because there's any sort of special feelings I have for Chris. I don't. Chris and I have an agreement here. I'm not giving Chris Hicks a pass on anything. I'm talking about facts, right from wrong, period. You can take everything out of how you personally feel of Chris. You can think Chris is the biggest POS in the world. You can think Chris is the greatest person in the world. The motion has to be taken out of that. There cannot be a motion, especially if you're going to run for chairman. The question needs to be answered. The lawsuit was filed as Chris had an egregious actions in the meeting and was suspended for those actions. And it was voted on for that reason, although no one that voted that I have spoken to knew that's what they were voting on. That vote needs to be recalled. The suspension needs to be lifted. And if they want to come back and do a trial or put it back to the floor for suspension in the right format, fine. 100%.
Well, you know what? You and I haven't talked about, I'm hearing what you're saying real time, and I would say, okay, if you want what you just described, I'd say, it's actually be a good idea for somebody to ask, not that my suspension be revoked, but that I be given a trial. That I was due a trial and I should have my trial. I never had a trial.
I disagree. I think the suspension, the motion should be nullified because it was not, it's an illegal motion.
It's easier for people. That it's not that it's nullified, just that I was due a trial and I should have my trial. If the outcome of that trial is the same, let it be the same. But I never had my trial.
But this situation
either way, you and I are in the same quadrant. Right. I'm just trying to make it easier that the motion wouldn't be to lift my suspension. The motion would be to let me have my trial.
This should be asked before a vote for anybody, because whomever takes position should be able to take their emotion about Chris or feelings for Chris out of it and say, you're right, there was a wrong and we need to right the wrong. However you do it, trial, nullify the motion, whatever the process is, this topic needs to be addressed at the hand of whomever is going to take over Central Committee. If the person that's running declines to answer or disagrees, then that person's the wrong person for the position, because you're going to end up with another Jeff Corcoran that's going to bring their emotion into it.
And you and I have both seen Jeff Corcoran, on these court things. What he gets out of them the most is, great news, we can start suspending other people. It's going to eat its own. By the way, what do you think about here? I'll tell you my personal opinion, and then I want to hear your reaction. First off, I think that Andy Capel should run. I actually think, and you could go talk to Louisa, she was there. I did a fantastic job in the Union Township meeting, making the argument that Andy Capel should run. Okay. And that he would be, and if he ran, I think he would be, I think you and I would have a lot. I'm not buds with Andy Capel, and you know this.
Oh, I'm aware. Right.
But he would be, I would have more confidence that he would be fair than Byron or Jeff Corcoran was. And I think, but that's one thing, but I want to throw another thing and then let you give your reactions. I also think that Louisa, especially if Andy Capel would not run, she should just run for chair, because she's saying she's running for vice chair. That presupposes Byron becomes chair. I would love to see a vote. Nobody should run unopposed. Hopefully we can agree on that. These unopposed deals should not be happening. And I would encourage Louisa to run for chair if Andy doesn't run, and just see how the vote comes out. Louisa could win. I personally think Louisa, she might not have the fancy supposed knowledge of Robert's rules, but she would be fair, and I wouldn't have a lot of concern that she would try to be fair, or if that she had been unfair, that she would try to correct that unfairness. But how do you react to that? Like, should Louisa run and should Andy run?
I think Louisa's concern is, being a chair, can she be truly objective for the party and the Central Committee being president of a PAC, which will endorse other candidates.
Okay.
So I think that's the concern, and I respect her for that, because other people would be like, "Oh, let's say, we'll just use an example. I'll pull one out of the hat here. Alan Freeman. Alan Freeman would come up with the excuse, "Yeah, I can be a trustee and a clerk of courts.
Yeah.
It's legal, but we don't care about ethics."
Okay, that's fair. I forgot about the PAC thing. What do you think about
Right.
Andy?
I have asked Andy numerous times before Jeff Corcoran, the initial person. I had a conversation with Andy to run originally, not because I have any special feelings for Andy, or I don't have a relation. I haven't talked to Andy Capel maybe once since I've resigned off the committee. I think maybe one time he and I've spoken. That's it. I don't have a relationship with Andy. We're both IT people. We get along, but Andy is fair. Andy's and honestly, and I'm not saying this to dog him, because he's very, very intelligent person, but when it comes to running meetings, he's not the most intelligent person in running meetings. But what I'll say about him is he can admit that. That's the key. The key is to understand and admit your weaknesses and your deficiencies, because that kind of person will learn and improve. And Andy, from the first time when I did a removal for Chris, and we went through it, Andy didn't know the process at all. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to handle it. He spent hours, and I mean hours, researching and reading and talking to Byron and talking to other people to make sure that he came to the table and that Chris got a fair trial, that the process was followed, all the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed, and I was not giving any preferential treatment. Even if I had tried to talk to Andy about something, he would shut me down and say, "I'm not going to answer that. I can't talk about that," because he knew it would implicate him to be kind of an unbiased person running the meeting. So I have a lot of respect for a person that can stand up, admit where they're weak, but also stand up to pressure when people are trying to pressure them to do the wrong thing. And that's Andy.
So do you have any other people that you think could run?
I'll tell you, man, it's slim pickings, and I'll tell you how I'm basing that off of. I have seen some of the craziest things go on in Central Committee. I mean, I've been involved with Central Committee in politics for going on 7+ years now, and from the beginning to now, and the last 2 years, I've never seen anything like it. And the people on the Central Committee sat on their hands while all of this stuff went on. There's so much. I'm not going to go into a 20-minute tangent, but just a recap. Greg lying to the sheriff's department and then coming to meetings and praying without reconciliation. There's one. Suspending Chris for the wrong reason and the vote not being recounted or recanted. That's two. Trish Lambeck's egregious behavior that should result in a suspension by assaulting another person.
Isn't that great? I don't do anything in a meeting. I get suspended supposedly for something I did in a meeting. Trish Lambeck assaults somebody in a meeting, gets whitewashed, the trial gets whitewashed, and nothing happens to her.
Right. It's a serious injustice. It's everything that's what's crazy. The Republicans out
like
here,
Democrats.
Well, all the Republicans on the Central Committee and people that are saying, we're conservative Republicans, they're all like, yeah, get to Washington, Doge, clean up the mess, clean up the swamp, get rid of the J6 facade DOJ people, get rid of them, deport all the immigrants. Yep. You want to clean Washington up, but you don't want to clean Clermont County
Absolutely.
up.
You and I are totally.
What is wrong with you people? Like,
and Clermont County is a microcosm of what happens nationally.
Clean your own house. But I mean, we're so focused on cleaning up Washington that our clothes are sitting around, the dishes are sitting in the sink with mold on them. Clean your own house up, and then come to me and say we want to clean Washington up.
Keep in mind that at least at the time we're recording this, Bill, I just looked before we went on, and Mitch McConnell voted against Tulsi Gabbard. So, people that talk about unity and so forth, you have this division, and I think it's local also between basically outsiders and insiders and establishment and non-establishment. And I'm always going to be outsider, non-establishment. And I think 90% outsider non-establishment. And because
Mitch
so
McConnell,
anyway,
but real quick, Mitch McConnell spent $60 million total for his Senate race. His opponent, Democrat opponent, was a lady. I don't remember her name.
oh yeah,
She spent roughly $80 million for her Senate seat. He spent $20 million less and won. But therein lies the problem. Primaries. And Chris, you've said it 100 times, primaries. And it goes back to what needs to happen in this election for chair. You need a selection of people to step up and run, right, so that the committee has choices to vote. Otherwise, you end up with a Mitch McConnell because you're like, well, that's all I've got. Right. The Democrats, quite honestly, were put in that position with Kamala Harris. A group of people pushed Kamala Harris and made it to where she was going to be the only choice. They bypassed all right. kinds of rules right. to make Kamala Harris the only choice. There were Democrats that were moderates that said that's the only choice. And guess what happened? They didn't right. vote for Kamala. They didn't vote for Trump, but they didn't vote for Kamala either. And they lost their party.
Well, let's remember this topic.
I don't know if have you ever seen the show House of Cards? Have you ever watched it?
Some seasons of it. I haven't seen it all.
Yeah, I'm finishing up the final season. And there's some bad parts in the show. It's got some language and some scenes, but if anybody wants to know how corrupt politics are, I would say that show depicts, quite honestly, just about any level of politics, state, local, federal. Right. That stuff really goes on. It's true how things are manipulated and controlled, even down to this Central Committee election. Because right. today there was a phone call, not to me, but it got to me, talking about, well, we got to do something. Andy Capple's running, and they're trying to get John McGraw to run as a vice chair. Seriously, people, who cares if
I hope Andy Capple's running?
I know, but that's what the old guard gets so scared that the calls start happening. We got to do something. We can't allow there to be more than one person.
Let's remember, before we move on to the next topic, let's remember that the way Jeff Corcoran got Central Committee chair unopposed. Byron and Jeff were going to run. We were both announced they were running for Central Committee chair, and there apparently was some backroom deal where Byron dropped out. That left Jeff unopposed, and then Byron, I think, was unopposed for vice chair. So it's these backroom deals, and I get politics, I get that kind of stuff, but especially after the whole Jeff Corcoran experience, I think, Bill, you and I would agree, after the whole nightmare of Jeff Corcoran, the notion of another unopposed Central Committee election where the only candidate running was the vice chair to Jeff Corcoran is unacceptable. There should be at least more than one person running.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, and I got to admit something. I had a realization the other day, actually. My thinking, because I have been indwelled in the wrong type of politics for the first several years of being in politics, I had sent a text message the other day, and I went back and I reread it, and I'm like, even my own thinking goes to the wrong place sometimes. I sent a text message that said, we need to make sure that we don't split the vote. In other words, if we've got 5 people running, let's get 3 of those 5 people not to run and get behind one and not split the vote. That's the problem. Even I still have to catch myself because I'm still in that wrong mentality of thinking. It was like why I got so mad about the Joe Dills state rep race. I was furious about Dylan Blevins being a third candidate because he said he would drop. But the reality is, if the choice is there for 3 candidates and one candidate didn't secure the votes, the voice of the people spoke. We have to stop, and I'm speaking to myself because I made a mistake. We have to stop trying to control who is running and who should, and like say, well, we got to get behind this person. No, we don't. Not for a primary. No, we don't.
Right. I by the way, just not to go, and I want to move on to the judge thing, but as it relates to that race, I personally think it's unethical to go get somebody to run for the intent of splitting the vote. I know you thought that I had something to do with, and I know Joe thought that I somehow encouraged Dylan to run at that time, which I didn't. I told him not to run. He ran anyway. When he did run, I supported him. But so I think the key thing is to be ethical. And people, what you can't understand is what people that might be listening won't grasp, I think you can grasp and I can grasp. A lot of these political people, they don't care about the will of the people. They do not care about the will of the people. If they could and manipulate through who runs and what goes on, that somebody who clearly is not the will of the people gets elected, they will absolutely do that. They don't care. It's all a facade. They don't care about the will of the people. So let's move on just for sake of time here, Bill.
Yep.
So the other thing we had on the list today was the municipal court judge opening caused by Jason Nagel moving over to common pleas court. So they had the period of applications for who would like to be considered. The only applicant was Katie Terpstra, who works for Mark DeCalvi in the prosecutor's office. And I have a lot of views on that. I've talked to some different people about the situation in Clermont County. And the first thing I just want to say, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, is that really sticks with me is that for a county our size, I've had several people tell me this in the legal club, okay? For a county our size, with a legal bar as big as ours, meaning the number of attorneys we have in Clermont County, when a judgeship comes up, there should be 3 to 5 people at least that apply for it. And and in Clermont County, we have this like basically almost nobody applies. And this is a good example right now. We have a municipal court judge opening. I thought, just as an aside, I thought, well, this probably happens because the lawyers are afraid of going against Colby, and that they're going to get, hacked in court and all this stuff. But one of the people I talked to said they don't actually know that that's the case. They just think it's super bizarre behavior. But any event, what's your reaction to, the 14th largest county, all the issues that get bitched about and moaned about, and then we have a judge opening and only one person applies that comes from that pedigree of loyalty to the prosecutor's office?
I think the problem lies that there needs to be some legislation around a waiting period, and I don't know how you would do this. I don't think somebody that's a prosecutor within the same county should be allowed to just jump right into a judgeship.
Okay.
It's a conflict of interest. There are so many deals that happen in court. How can a judge be unbiased and really call out their mentor?
Right.
I've had this problem. All these judges, for the most part, have been under Mark DeCalvi. And when I first initially supported Mark DeCalvi, my thought was, wow, I mean, they all know each other. They work well together. It would be a benefit to the county because they all know how to work with each other. Actually, that's the reason you don't want it, because nobody's going to, they're friends,
right.
They're cigar buddies, they're card buddies. You're never going to get truly true justice, unequivocal justice, unless you get people that aren't friends with each other. It's human nature,
right,
to be friends with somebody. I mean, let's say I'm a judge and Mark DeCalvi comes up and says, I want to do a plea deal on this, or, and they talk, they talk in the back. They do. So
right.
That judge is going to be more inclined to give Mark what he wants because they have a personal relationship outside, 30 years of knowing each other, working together. There's a respect. I don't think a judge can be truly unbiased with them. But I think if you send a prosecutor to another county, get them out of the mix, I think 2 years is a bare minimum to get the disconnect. You send them 2 years away, at least you've got something, and then they can come back and apply for a judgeship in the county. But
I think that one of the things that stuck with me, and I learned this basically from a lawyer named Sue Ellen Bradford that I was involved with.
I know who. Yeah, I know
back
who
with, and is that when and having encountered the justice system as it is a little bit myself, the point is that when all of your judges, a judge that comes from the prosecutor's office is inclined to think in the terms of guilty, and to accept whatever the prosecutor's office says. And most of those people have never been on the other side. You get what I'm saying? They've never been the one being accused. And Bill, you and I we haven't, had, well, it's all like some big criminal experience or something like that. But having experience, just seeing how the system works, how the judges work, how it is that you realize that's true, is that when they're all coming from the prosecutor side of things, they will have a tendency to view, they get disconnected from the citizens, is the way I'll put it. They get disconnected from how the justice system adversely affects people every day. And I will extend that into civil things too, not just criminal things, but it's just kind of this club where there's an assumption of, it's weird because it's like Dan Bongino says this about politicians, is that, no matter what they tell you, they want to kiss your baby, they love you, but realize that all these people hate you. Like, and I think a lot of these people get in, they look down on the dredge of humanity. So any event, Katie Terps was the only applicant.
I want to do just a quick test here.
Okay.
How do you spell Erin Neace? Her last name was Neace.
Neace.
Correct. All right. Go to Municipal Court Case Access. Just pull up Erin Neace's name. All right. Now, I don't see any history on a domestic violence. How is that possible? Erin Neace and her husband were arrested in Union Township for domestic violence. Arrested, both of them. That means an arrest happened. There is nothing in Case Access about Erin Neace.
They got it taken out or whatever, like
nothing. There's nothing in here. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't expunged because I looked within a year, and an expungement can't take place until.
Oh, and you're saying it was never there.
Correct. An expungement takes a year to get granted no matter what. Let's say they pled out. From what I understand, it was dismissed in a backroom deal, dismissed, and never put in the system. That's a problem.
Erin Neace was tight with David Ubel and the whole Key Hall grant. That's a whole topic. We could have a whole topic on the Erin Neace experience going forward through time. And
but so you can test this theory that Chris and I are talking about. Just simply go to Case Access, pull Erin Neace up, then go to the system. Yeah, then go to Google and Google Erin Neace's name. You'll see all kinds of news reports of her and her husband being arrested for domestic violence. It happened, and it's not in the system. There's proof right there that it goes on.
So I'll just throw you, and we'll go. This is a common pleas statement, but all the things like private citizen affidavits get put under the category miscellaneous in the docket system. And when I had went out there related to Colby, all of a sudden, the miscellaneous category is no longer available to anybody, not lawyers, not anybody. You can only get those records by doing a record request for those records because they want to hide things that involve, because all the cases that are particularly screwball end up being miscellaneous, and they want to hide those, like a private citizen affidavit against elected official, because they don't want people to be able to see it. That's the buddy system as well. But so Katie Terps is the only person that applied for the judgeship. We'll see what happens. I'll be glad to orchestrate some help on a campaign that the governor should look at somebody else. But this is pretty much a layup. They pretty much just do what the internal system wants. The last thing we wanted to talk about was the Board of Elections and Rick Combs leaving the Board of Elections in March. So over this past weekend, there was interviews by the executive committee for
Rick Combs or Rick Combs or Rick Grant?
Rick Combs. Rick Grant will probably have to leave. So Rick Combs is the one actually leaving right now. And then Rick Grant, which I think we're a little bit in the dark on, I wish him well, but he's had some sort of medical issue. I've heard different things, but he's not been involved in anything. So I think he probably is going to be gone. Okay. And we're going to know at some point what's going on with them. And then we'll have another member. But so there were three people that applied, Rob Wing, who we both know, Larry Heller, and me. And so, and my thing is it's a perfect win-win because I actually think by far I'm the most qualified, but they will be reticent to ever approve me for anything, right? So it becomes how it works. So, the funny thing is you mentioned Erin Neace. I don't know if you were thinking that direction, but Larry Heller was the one selected. He was Ubel's assistant. His daughter is a woman named Jackie Block, and she was on the Union Township Committee. And you might not even know this, Bill, but she, I don't know when you got involved. Okay, so you might or might not know this, but so Jackie Block and Aaron Neese were besties. They were buddies.
I did not know
And so
that.
when the 2018 election came along for who was going to be the exec for Union Township, after the Larry Heller had sent out an email about how certain people weren't elected properly and couldn't participate. One of those was Lloyd Akers. There was a thing. She ultimately then didn't run for exec for Union Township in the meeting, but there was a lot of confusion around it. But Larry Heller is the one that got selected for the BOE. He was on the BOE before as a patronage appointment, being Ubel's assistant. I don't know if people know this, but a lot of times the chair of a party, like what the role that Painter is in, they will be on the board of elections. And like Alex Tranafilo was on the board of elections in Hamilton County. Okay. But in Clermont County, you have a lot of times you have this. A lot of places like Hamilton County, I don't think would allow David Painter to be party chair because he's an elected office. So you have this. We have this weirdness. Under Greg Simpson is when Rick Grant got on the board of elections, and then under Ubel, who was commissioner at the time. So it would be. You can't. Oh, that's the thing too. Is you can't. I don't think you can run for or be in elected office and be on the board of elections. Let me correct that. So under Ubel couldn't have been under the board of elections. So it became Larry Heller, Ubel's assistant, and then when Greg Simpson was chair, he wanted to be on the board of elections, but then he blocked out of it because people like me were all bitching and moaning about how many patronage positions do you need, Greg, because he was on the racing commission, on the historical Ohio history connection, et cetera. So any event, that's the thing. So the submission will be for Larry Heller. The funny part is the vote was, we had a little forum at Union Township that Andy Capel put on, and Larry Heller's policy positions were there's nothing that needs improvement at the Board of Elections, and it wasn't for us to be involved with voter roll integrity. That was a Secretary of State function. I can't make that up. Okay. And Rob Wing, to his defense, Rob Wing basically just said, I was not, that he was not, he didn't have any experience really. He was just very honest. And then I had like a 7-point platform, put the Dropbox camera on 24/7 live stream, et cetera, and put campaign finance and petitions online with appropriate redaction, all kind of things that I thought were very good, simple improvements. And then the vote was 10-3. I got told by Painter the vote was 10 for Heller, 3 for me, and none for Rob. So that's the outcome.
I know probably Andy voted for you, but who were the other two execs?
I don't know. The thing is that the insiders, don't you think it just kills them that anybody will vote for me? It's like persona non grata to vote for me for something.
I would say Tracy Sparks probably voted for you. I don't know that, but I
don't know.
That would be the only other one I could think of. I don't know who
I have not, nobody's told me.
Maybe Greg Simpson.
I won't even ask Andy, like what he did. But
maybe Greg Simpson voted for you.
And if Rick Grant comes up, I'll put my name in again. I got the paperwork done. And see what's so funny is these board of elections, they should not be. The people on the board of elections should care about election integrity. They should care about, and so they should care about campaign finance. And, and so I just feel like it gets used as a patronage appointment. If you get what I'm saying, people have to go to like 20 meetings a year type of deal.
What's disappointing to me is I had Friends of Liberty had an entire election integrity team. 3 of those.
Oh, and nobody from that applied.
Right. 3 individuals, Jerry Seipelt, Calvin Poley, and John Berger. John Berger and Calvin Poley are very active in the election integrity stuff. Why would neither one of them apply? That makes no sense to me why neither one would apply for those positions. Unless they were asked not to. I would hope that's not the case, but I can tell you Larry's friends with a lot of people. He's been around a long time, and Larry has a lot of friends that are
Well, plus
along the
you
lines
had
of
me. Like I'm the natural. I think I probably made it impossible for Rob because he openly said he didn't have experience. And I'm the pariah. And but I put forward. I'll just rattle them off here because I think I would love Larry Heller. I mean, he said in the Union Township meeting there was nothing that needed. It was, and I said right when he said it that nothing needed to be improved. That it was a Kamala Harris answer. Like nothing needs. What would you make better? I didn't ask the question either. Somebody else asked him the question about what would you improve. But here's the 7 things I had: is 24/7 live streaming of the Board of Elections ballot drop box on the BOE website. By the way, Miami County does that. There's like if you go search, there's like 4 or 5 counties at least that do it already in Ohio. Subject to appropriate redaction, online posting of candidate petitions and financial reports. Live streaming of all BOE meetings. So BOE meetings not only aren't live streamed, they aren't even recorded right now. And most counties live stream and record their BOE meetings right now. Why would we want to have I'm making a joke here, but why would you want to have a board of elections where integrity is supposed to be the number one thing actually live stream their own meetings? You would think that would be like part of the whole deal. Implementation of policies consistent with other BOEs. By the way, Bill, the thing with the FULU PAC, which I don't even know where that stands on. So if anybody doesn't know, I got dinged on not having filed a report in the right time period, and so did something Bill was involved with. I learned from that in other counties they don't do that. That if you've never had a violation and you have a late report, they believe it's in their discretion. And like Adams County, I actually even got copies of all the draft standard template letters they send to people if there's a thing like a day late on a report, stuff like that, or to notify somebody. So I had implementation of policies consistent with other BOEs, insisting on having BOE legal counsel that refrains from partisan political activity, aka Brian Shreve, hack politician, running campaigns and running fundraisers. Ballots, focus on ballot security, voter roll integrity, voter ID, and in-person voting, and improvement in voting day procedures such as boundary markers and curbside voting. You and I could probably testify to. I know you did vote at when you lived in Polo Fields at First Baptist. But every election, when we hand stuff out, there is always some cluster F around where the boundaries are, what's the right boundaries, and it's like, why can't we figure out how to have a concrete way to do these basic things right? Because for where you vote and for First Baptist and for where I vote at the Civic Center, it's all concrete, it's all pavement. So you're going to have maybe have some lines you can put on the ground, like put down tape, like painter's tape to mark the line or something. But so anyway, I had those things. And then the last thing, I don't mean to be going on and on, is I personally believe, and I've argued this, that, Shrive shouldn't be involved in heavy partisan activity. So I also had pledged, and I think this, Bill, I had pledged I would quit putting local political posts on Hicks Watchdog. I would quit being involved in local political crap. And I would quit, and I would close down reform the Clermont GOP PAC, and which is, by the way, consistent with my view that people in a board of elections role shouldn't be involved in heavy duty politics. I basically made an offer that was everything that you would think the insiders would want, right? Is that I would get uninvolved in local political stuff, so as to not have an appearance of impropriety being on a board of elections. Because frankly, I don't think anybody that's on a board of elections shouldn't do the kind of stuff I do. Like, frankly, they shouldn't do the kind of stuff you do either, right? They should be, as independent as they can be.
That's one of the reasons I haven't ran for school board. People ask me all the time, why don't you run for a political office? Why you sit and you talk about change and all that? There are things that the way that you and I handle things aren't always what you would consider as a way a politician would handle it. Not that I think, I mean, Trump gets away with it because Trump's an anomaly, but typically the way Trump handles things is not the way that we typically see politics. It's
Right.
kind of like Fetterman. Fetterman shows up in his PJs to meetings. People are like, look at him like, dude, what is wrong with you? There are just things that there's just a way of doing business as a politician or elected official. And, I get it. Over time, maybe that will change, because I do believe there are things that people like you and I, the way we think, the way our thought process is, it would clean things up. But the snowflakes wouldn't be able to handle us in an elected. We'd end up getting the county sued or the township sued in 5 minutes, because people can't handle the hard truth. They need it served on a silver platter with icing around it and 3 layers of cake. No, I'm giving you a paper plate and a plastic fork, because that's all you need. You don't need all the fluff. I mean, I hope the country, the way we think of in politics over time, changes, because I think it will change the type of politicians we have.
Exactly. You get too many people, and it's the same reason I say somebody who's like a commissioner, they'll be reticent, for example, to get involved with a school levy, okay, because they have nothing to gain from it, and most politicians like to talk out of all sides of their mouths. Like they like to, and I tell people and all the time, and is watch politicians. They always want to talk to you one-on-one if they can, because then they can tell everybody a slightly different version of reality. They try to avoid, and Trump's, I think, an anomaly, because he's not really a politician, and we've reached a state where people are so sick of politicians, like Mitch McConnell. Okay, they're so disgustingly sick of this crap that I listen to Jimmy Dore, who's a liberal comedian podcaster, and he points up, like, it shows you how vapid. So he's not a Trump supporter, but he sounds way more like a Trump supporter than most Republicans do, like when you listen to his show. But he points up as like Donald Trump. Now he's coming from the left, and he's saying Donald Trump, that shows just how horrifically bad our politics has become, when he'll say that a guy with all the baggage Donald Trump has, and with it is an existential threat to the entire philosophy of the Democratic Party in the United States. Like, it's like, give me a break. And so he'll say this in a demeaning way towards Trump. Donald Trump's a game show host from TV, and the entirety of the Illuminati of the Democratic Party cannot figure out how to deal with this guy, because and he says that is an indictment of how bad politics is. And he would say the same thing about the Republicans. So I agree with you 100%. I hope that people start realizing that you need people like you and me, okay? You need people like Elon. You need people at all levels doing this stuff. At all levels, pushing back. And voters need to realize that when somebody's just telling you what you want to hear, they're probably doing nothing more than telling you what you want to hear, and not going to really solve any problems. So I think we're actually at an optimistic time with Trump at the federal level. But if we can't get some of that at the Clermont level to happen to create reform, it's be a true travesty. I think, I put on my Facebook, Bill, we need a Doge in the Clermont County. You and I can volunteer. Will you volunteer with me to be on the Doge team in Clermont County?
Oh my gosh!
And look at how they're wasting money.
Tom Eigel would resign. So Louisa, actually, she's been saying that for a while, that we need a Clermont Doge. I mean, I do believe that there's a lot of need for that throughout this county. I mean, there's a lot going on. A lot of people are starting to wake up and see that the government doesn't always have the people's best interest at heart.
Or they're just dumb. Like they just dumbly waste money that, like the 350 grand for Eastgate Mall. Okay. Like just that money you can't get back. And I'll leave it at this, and we'll see if you have a closing comment. But I just watched, the commissioners formally rejected the one bid for the shelter. But they could have just rejected. They brought on outside counsel on a Zoom call, so they probably paid $600 just to have some guy come on there and say nothing. He really said nothing. But it's another example of how the politicians can just waste money. It can be malevolent, but it can also be just dumb. Like, do they not know? Like, why would you pay this guy? Because most lawyers are going to bill you like an hour for something like that. These high price lawyers. Why would you need to pay this guy just to come on the call for 2 minutes and say nothing?
Yeah.
So, all right. You have any closing thoughts on any of the 3 topics that we've talked about?
I've covered it all. We're good.
All right. Thank you, Bill. And hopefully we will. This will get worked out well, but hopefully we won't have to do a pre-recorded one again. I think it works better when we're live, and I think you and I tried to do that. We just had a conflict this time. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody who listened to that. And hopefully we will never have to do it again. I appreciate Bill doing it and us figuring out an approach to it while we had a conflict. So thank you all for listening. Have a